The subway station was buzzing with people. The hum of conversations, the occasional screech of trains, and the shuffle of footsteps created a chaotic symphony that most commuters were used to. But for Mrs. Patterson, it felt overwhelming. She had spent most of her afternoon at the local market, walking slowly from stall to stall, choosing fresh vegetables, fruits, and a few treats for herself. At 72, every trip like this left her tired, but she enjoyed it. It gave her a sense of independence and a small escape from the quiet of her apartment. Her small handbag hung from her shoulder, and she held her grocery bags in both hands. She was trying to balance them carefully, making sure nothing spilled as she stepped onto the subway platform. Around her, people moved quickly, pushing past with little regard for the elderly woman navigating her way through the crowd. Her pace was slow, cautious, and she knew she was invisible to most. She wasn't used to being watched, but today, someone's eyes had found her. Among the crowd, a young man on a motorcycle jacket and helmet was weaving through the passengers. His bike boots made heavy sounds on the platform, and his eyes kept darting around, scanning everyone carefully. When they landed on Mrs. Patterson, something in him shifted. Her bag looked small and easy to grab, and she was clearly distracted with her groceries. He calculated his move silently, waiting for the perfect moment. The train pulled into the station with a screech, the doors sliding open to reveal the crowded interior. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, trying to find space among the crowd. She didn't notice the biker moving closer, blending in among the passengers like he belonged there. Then, in a sudden, swift motion, he grabbed her handbag. Mrs. Patterson gasped, her hand flailing as she tried to hold on to it.
"Hey, stop!"
she shouted, but the noise of the subway swallowed her voice. People turned their heads, some shocked, some frozen, but none acted fast enough. The young man pushed past, weaving through the crowd, his helmet hiding most of his face. Her groceries jostled, some falling to the floor, rolling under benches and people's feet. The small crowd around them began murmuring, whispers of shock spreading like wildfire. In that same subway car, near the back, a tall man with a calm demeanor was standing, leaning casually against the wall. He had been returning from a charity event, dressed simply but with an air of confidence that made people give him space without thinking about it. When he saw what happened, his eyes narrowed, not with anger but with focus. He had seen plenty in his life, but a crime, even small, could not go unnoticed. The man John didn't rush immediately. He didn't need to. His presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere. The young biker, thinking he was slipping away unnoticed, didn't realize he had already been seen. John's gaze followed him with steady precision, analyzing each movement, waiting for the right moment. Mrs. Patterson, still reaching for her bag, could barely breathe. Her hands trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. She had lived a long life, faced many challenges, but being robbed in the middle of a crowded subway was terrifying. She had hoped someone would step in, but the fear in people's eyes made her think she might be alone in this. The biker, now near the exit of the train car, felt a rush of adrenaline. He thought he was in control. He looked around quickly, calculating his escape, his mind racing faster than his heart. But then he noticed the man in the back, tall and strong, moving calmly toward him. Something in the man's walk, the ease with which he navigated the crowd, made the biker pause. There was no panic in the man's steps, no chaos, but a quiet authority that seemed impossible to ignore. The crowd began to notice the tension. Some passengers pulled out their phones, filming the scene, whispering to one another. "Is that?" one muttered, eyes wide. John's presence alone changed the energy in the subway car. People felt a mix of awe and reassurance, as if the danger they feared might finally be met with someone capable of stopping it. The biker hesitated, sensing he might have underestimated the situation. He had snatched a bag thinking it was a simple, quick grab, but now he was facing someone who didn't seem intimidated, someone who wasn't just another commuter. His heart pounded, and he realized he had only seconds to make a decision. Panic and shame collided, but he tried to push forward anyway, thinking he could still make a run for it. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patterson clutched the grocery bag to her chest, her other hand still reaching toward her handbag. Her knees shook, but something in the air gave her hope. There was a presence that felt protective, a force she didn't fully understand, but it made her feel less alone. The world of the subway, usually loud and uncaring, seemed to slow down in that moment. John's movements were deliberate. He didn't shout, didn't create panic. He simply moved with careful precision, positioning himself in the path of the fleeing biker. His eyes locked onto the young man's, communicating something unspoken. "Stop." The biker froze for a fraction of a second, and in that pause, the entire dynamic shifted. The crowd around them leaned in slightly, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Mrs. Patterson's voice caught in her throat as she whispered a shaky, "Please." She didn't know who this man was, but she felt an instinctive gratitude, an understanding that help was already here. Her bag, her groceries, her dignity, all of it hung in that delicate balance. The biker's mind raced, thoughts colliding. He thought of escape routes, of jumping off the train at the next station, of forcing his way past the imposing man. But John's presence was unwavering. He didn't need to push or shove. The biker realized with a sudden clarity that running wasn't an option. Something about the man's calmness, the intensity in his gaze, made it impossible to move without consequence. In that crowded subway car, time seemed to stretch. Passengers held their breath. Mrs. Patterson's hands trembled, gripping her groceries tighter, feeling hope slowly replace fear. The young man on the bike jacket and helmet now faced a choice he hadn't expected to confront so directly. He could keep running, risking everything, or he could stop and face the consequences. And then, as John closed the distance between them, a quiet authority filled the space. The biker's adrenaline faltered. He felt the weight of judgment, not in anger, but in the unmistakable presence of someone who could handle the situation with skill and care. It wasn't just about strength. It was about awareness, decisiveness, and an unspoken moral command that the young man couldn't ignore. Mrs. Patterson finally reached for her handbag, eyes wide as she saw the scene unfold. Her hands trembled, but she was ready to reclaim what was hers. Around them, the crowd whispered, filmed, and watched, knowing they were witnessing something rare, not just a theft, but the moment when courage met opportunity in the most unexpected place. The train continued to hum with life, unaware of the drama that had unfolded within its cars. People shuffled, some moving to the doors, some frozen mid-step, all eyes on the confrontation. The young biker, helmet slightly askew, now faced a reality he hadn't considered. That actions, no matter how small, carry weight. And sometimes someone unexpected is watching, ready to make sure justice, in whatever small way, is restored. Mrs. Patterson's heart pounded as she held her breath. This was a moment she would never forget, a moment when fear collided with hope, and the smallest actions could ripple into something much larger. And as John stepped closer, calm, strong, and unwavering, it became clear that this was the moment that could change everything. For the young biker, for Mrs. Patterson, and for everyone witnessing it. The young biker froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He hadn't expected anyone to confront him. He thought the subway was just another crowd where he could slip through unnoticed. But the tall man approaching him, calm and deliberate, changed everything. The biker's mind raced. Should he push forward, keep running, or stop? John Cena moved with confidence, but not aggressively. There was no yelling, no shouting. He simply positioned himself in the path of the fleeing biker, narrowing the space without seeming threatening. It was a quiet power, something that made people notice even without words. The biker's adrenaline surged, but it was no longer the rush of victory. It was fear mixed with uncertainty. "Hand it over," John said. His voice was firm, steady, and carried a weight that demanded attention. The biker glanced around quickly. The train car was full of people now staring, some whispering, others holding their phones up. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. There were witnesses, and that tall man, he wasn't like the others. The biker tried to sidestep, thinking he could dodge John, but Cena anticipated the movement. He adjusted smoothly, blocking the way. Every attempt the biker made to push past him failed. The crowd began murmuring, leaning in to see what would happen next. Some people whispered, "Is that really him?" Others held their phones, recording every moment. The tension in the car was electric. Mrs. Patterson, still clutching her groceries with one hand, had managed to keep her balance. Her other hand reached out for her handbag, still dangling in the biker's grip. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. In her 72 years, she had seen her share of small crimes, but she had never imagined someone would step in like this, calmly and confidently, to stop a thief. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. The biker's breathing grew heavy. His helmet made it hard to see clearly, but he could feel the pressure. Every movement he made seemed countered effortlessly. He had been confident when he grabbed the bag, thinking it would be easy. Now, with every step he took, it felt like the walls were closing in. John kept his voice calm. "You don't have to do this," he said, almost conversationally. "There are better ways to handle things than stealing from someone who has done nothing to you." The biker froze, the words sinking in. He hadn't expected someone to speak to him like this. Someone wasn't just stopping him physically, but speaking to him as if he could change, as if he mattered. Around them, the passengers were holding their breath. A few older commuters clutched their belongings tighter, worried about what might happen. Some younger passengers whispered excitedly, murmurs spreading through the car like wildfire. People were watching a real-life scene unfold, one that felt almost cinematic, but there was no pretense here. Everything felt real, raw, human. The biker made a sudden move to dodge John, a desperate attempt to escape. Cena reacted instantly, moving with surprising speed for someone his size. He intercepted the biker's path, steadying him without causing harm. The biker stumbled slightly but didn't fall. He looked up, helmet tilted, and met Cena's gaze. For the first time, he noticed the kindness behind the stern expression, the calm that wasn't weakness but control. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. She could see the struggle, but there was no real violence. John moved with care, ensuring that neither the biker nor anyone else in the car got hurt. She felt a surge of gratitude so strong it almost brought tears to her eyes. She whispered to herself, "Thank God someone is here." The biker, panting, tried to speak. I just... He hesitated, unsure of how to explain his actions. He wasn't used to being confronted like this, to being addressed directly about the choices he made. His mind had only thought of escape, not consequences, not reflection. John shook his head slightly, not with anger, but with disappointment that felt constructive rather than condemning. "It's not too late," he said. "You can still make the right choice. Let her bag go and no one gets hurt. You don't have to be defined by a single mistake." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy but clear. The biker's hands tightened around the bag for a moment, then loosened slightly. The crowd noticed the change immediately. Whispers turned into murmurs of encouragement. Some people even clapped softly, appreciating the calm resolution. Mrs. Patterson, holding her groceries close, finally stepped forward, her trembling hands ready to retrieve her handbag. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone reminded the young man of the person he had wronged. The biker's eyes darted around the subway car, seeing the faces of strangers who were now silently urging him to stop. There was no shouting, no anger, just quiet expectation. It hit him that his actions had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. This wasn't just about stealing a bag. It was about respect, decency, and realizing that others were watching, noticing, and expecting better from him. He hesitated again, torn between panic and conscience. Cena remained calm, patient, letting the young man make his own decision but remaining an unyielding presence. Mrs. Patterson slowly approached, reaching her hand out toward the bag. Her fingers brushed against it and the biker flinched. For a moment, everything felt frozen. The train continued its motion, the hum of machinery blending with the silent tension in the car. Then, almost imperceptibly, the biker loosened his grip. The bag slipped slightly and Mrs. Patterson grabbed it firmly, holding it close to her chest. Relief flooded through her, but she didn't let go of the situation. Her eyes were on the young man, on John, trying to absorb everything happening around her. Cena nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that the immediate threat was over. He didn't speak harshly or reprimand the biker. He simply maintained his presence, ensuring that no sudden moves would disrupt the fragile resolution. The young man slumped slightly, realizing he hadn't fully thought through his choices. Fear, shame, and adrenaline swirled inside him, leaving him momentarily powerless. Passengers began to exhale slowly, murmuring in relief. Some whispered words of praise for John, though he didn't seem to notice. He was focused entirely on the situation, making sure Mrs. Patterson was safe and that the young man understood the impact of his actions. There was no spectacle here, only a real human moment of intervention and reflection. Mrs. Patterson, still clutching her groceries and handbag, finally found her voice. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes wet with tears. Her words were simple but full of emotion. She didn't need to say more. Her gratitude radiated, filling the subway car in a quiet wave. The young biker sat down on a nearby bench, helmet in hand, head hanging. He was no longer defiant. Instead, he felt exposed, vulnerable, and perhaps for the first time he truly understood the consequences of what he had done. John stood nearby, calm but observant, allowing the young man to process everything. Around them, the subway car slowly returned to normal. Passengers resumed their seats or stood quietly, still whispering, still watching. But the tension had eased. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her grip on her groceries and bag, finally able to breathe without fear. Her day, which had started with fatigue and worry, now carried a strange sense of gratitude and relief. The young biker looked up, meeting Cena's gaze. There was no anger in the eyes he saw, only expectation, care, and a quiet insistence that he could still make the right choice. For the first time in the afternoon, he felt the weight of responsibility, not as a threat, but as a chance to change, to think, to reflect. The train slowed as it approached the next station. Passengers began to shift in anticipation of their stop, but the energy of the moment lingered. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her bag once more, grateful to have it back safely. The young man remained seated, silently processing everything he had just experienced, and John Cena, calm and steady, watched both of them, making sure the resolution held and that no one would be harmed as they exited the train. In that moment, the subway car was a small world of human emotion, fear, courage, reflection, and relief. No one spoke loudly, but everyone felt it. Mrs. Patterson's relief, the young biker's hesitation, and Cena's quiet authority combined to create a moment that would be remembered by all who witnessed it. It was proof that courage doesn't always roar and help doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply steps in, calm and steady, making a difference in the lives of people who need it most. The young biker slumped on the bench, still holding his helmet in his hands, staring at the floor. For the first time, he felt a heaviness that wasn't just from his adrenaline. It was a weight of realization. The action he had taken, snatching a bag from an elderly woman, wasn't just a small crime. It was something that reflected badly on who he thought he was. He had expected fear, maybe even applause for his daring, but what he felt instead was shame. And now the tall man, calm and steady, was right there, watching him, making it impossible to ignore the consequences. John Cena didn't move quickly or shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to keep the biker from making a rash move. He stood a few steps away, arms relaxed but eyes fixed, waiting patiently. It wasn't intimidation that kept the young man in place. It was the quiet certainty that this man knew exactly what he was doing and that he cared more about right and wrong than making a spectacle. Mrs. Patterson, still holding her handbag close, glanced at the young man. There was fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else, understanding. She knew that people make mistakes. She also knew that sometimes someone stepping in at the right moment can change everything. She didn't speak at first, but her gaze carried gratitude and a silent plea. Please understand. The young biker finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. I didn't think anyone would see. I just needed... He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. John stepped closer, but not in a threatening way. His calm voice filled the space. Needing something doesn't give you the right to take it from someone else. There are other ways to get what you need. You can choose to fix this right now. The biker's hands shook slightly. He had never been confronted like this. Not with calm authority, not with words that made sense. Most people had shouted at him, ignored him, or just looked away. But now, someone was showing him a way out without anger, a way to change his path if he wanted to. He felt torn. Part of him wanted to run, to escape. But another part felt a strange pull, an understanding that this was his chance to do something right. Passengers in the subway car were leaning forward, whispering quietly to one another. Some were filming, but most were just watching. They had never seen a scene like this. An elderly woman, a young man who had made a mistake, and a calm, imposing man handling the situation with patience and care. It felt real, raw, and human, and everyone there could feel the tension and the possibility of redemption in the air. The biker shifted, still unsure. His mind flashed through the reasons he had done this. The money he thought he needed, the thrill, the thought that nobody would stop him. Now those thoughts seemed small, foolish, and reckless. He could feel the judgment. Yes, but it wasn't cruelty. It was a chance to reflect on himself. John's words continued, steady and unhurried. It's never too late to make a better choice. Let go of the bag. You don't have to be defined by this one mistake. Mrs. Patterson slowly approached, her movements careful and deliberate. She didn't rush, but her presence reminded the young man of what he had done. He looked at her and something shifted in his chest, a pang of guilt that he had tried to ignore until now. Her eyes were full of trust, and it made him realize that trust could be broken with one careless action, and it could be repaired only if he chose to do the right thing. The young biker's fingers tightened around the bag for a moment, then loosened. He exhaled slowly, as if the air he had been holding in all afternoon had finally escaped. I'm sorry, he said almost to himself. The words felt strange on his lips, but they were the first honest words he had spoken in a long time. Cena nodded slightly, not with judgment, but with quiet approval. The bag slipped further, and Mrs. Patterson reached out, taking it gently but firmly. The relief on her face was immediate and visible. She clutched the bag tightly, holding it close to her chest as though it were a lifeline. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. Thank you for helping. Cena offered her a reassuring nod, his focus never leaving the young man. The biker sitting on the bench lowered his head, ashamed but also beginning to understand that this was a moment of learning, a rare chance to reflect on his choices. The subway car, which had been tense and chaotic moments ago, now felt still. The passengers who had been watching were whispering quietly to one another. Some were offering silent encouragement to the young man, while others were looking at Mrs. Patterson with admiration for her patience and calmness. It was a moment of human connection where fear, hope, and reflection collided in a small space that felt larger than the world outside. Cena crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the young biker's level without seeming threatening. You have a choice now, he said softly, almost like he was sharing a secret rather than scolding. You can decide who you want to be starting right here. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's what we do after that counts. The young man swallowed hard. He could feel tears welling up in his eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He hadn't realized he needed this confrontation. Not just the fear of being caught, but the chance to understand, to feel the weight of his choices, and to make a better decision. He looked at Cena, then at Mrs. Patterson, then back at Cena, and finally nodded slowly. Mrs. Patterson reached out and touched the young man's arm gently. I forgive you, she said, her voice kind. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, just don't do it again. Her words weren't angry or harsh. They were human, understanding, and full of the compassion that comes with years of experience and empathy. The young man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected forgiveness. He had expected anger, punishment, or ridicule, but not this. For a moment, silence filled the car. It wasn't awkward. It was full of meaning. Everyone could feel the weight of the lesson being learned, the power of patience, understanding, and the courage to intervene. Cena stood tall again, giving the young man space to reflect, while Mrs. Patterson held her bag and groceries, finally feeling safe once more. The young man, still seated, felt a strange mixture of shame, relief, and gratitude. He looked around at the other passengers, some of whom gave him nods of encouragement. He realized that the world was full of choices and that some of the best lessons came in the most unexpected ways. A moment ago he had been running from responsibility, trying to escape his actions. Now he was confronting them, guided by someone who didn't judge but offered a path to redemption. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her groceries, smiling faintly at Cena. You really didn't have to do this, she said. But I am so glad you did. Cena shook his head lightly with a modest smile. I just did what anyone should do, he replied. Sometimes the right thing is just being there at the right time. The young biker finally spoke again, voice quiet but steady. I understand, he said. I will try to do better. Cena nodded and the young man exhaled, finally releasing some of the tension that had built up inside him. It was a beginning, a small but important first step toward change. The subway slowed as it approached the next station. Passengers began shifting, preparing to exit, but the energy in the car had shifted completely. Fear and tension had been replaced by reflection, relief, and an unspoken understanding that something important had just occurred. Mrs. Patterson clutched her belongings close, The young man sat quietly and Cena remained calm and steady, ensuring everyone was safe before they reached the platform. In that moment, the subway car was more than just a place of transit. It had become a classroom of life, teaching lessons of courage, understanding, and the power of human connection. The young biker, once reckless and thoughtless, now had a chance to reflect on his actions and make better choices. Mrs. Patterson, once fearful, now felt protected and valued. And Cena, in his calm, steady way, had reminded everyone present that doing the right thing often means stepping in quietly but firmly. As the train doors opened, Mrs. Patterson stepped off first, the young biker following slowly behind. Still processing everything, Cena remained a few steps back, watching to make sure no further harm came to anyone. The crowd on the platform watched, some whispering, some taking photos, all witnessing a rare, human moment of courage, patience, and redemption. And as the subway pulled away, carrying its usual mix of passengers and stories, the lessons of that afternoon lingered in the minds of those who had seen it. Courage could be quiet, forgiveness could be unexpected, and even small acts of intervention could ripple through the lives of people in ways that mattered far beyond the immediate moment. The subway slowed as it approached the next station, and a soft chime announced the arrival. The doors opened with a hiss and passengers began to shift, preparing to exit. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her grip on her handbag and groceries, her hands still trembling slightly. She felt a sense of relief, but it was mixed with lingering anxiety. Her day, which had started like any other, had turned into a dramatic test of courage and human kindness. The young biker remained seated, helmet in hand, his head lowered. He could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on him, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt like a quiet nudge, a reminder that what he did mattered and that he had a chance to make things right. For the first time, he reflected on the choices he had been making, the shortcuts he had taken, and the mistakes he had ignored for too long. John Cena remained calm, standing a few steps behind both of them. His presence was steady, reassuring, and almost invisible in its power. He didn't need to shout or push. His quiet authority had already done more than any loud command could. Passengers whispered to each other, exchanging glances of awe. Some held their phones up, capturing a moment they knew would be remembered. A real act of courage and humanity in a place that usually felt chaotic and indifferent. Mrs. Patterson finally took a deep breath. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at Cena. Her voice was sincere and her gratitude filled the small space around them. Cena nodded modestly, giving a small smile. "I'm glad you're safe," he replied. "That's what matters most." His words were simple, but they carried weight, and Mrs. Patterson felt comforted. The young biker finally lifted his gaze, looking at both Mrs. Patterson and Cena. For a long moment he didn't speak. His thoughts swirled with fear, shame, and something new, understanding. He realized he had acted recklessly, thinking only of himself without considering the impact of his actions on others. Now, seeing the calm and controlled way Cena handled the situation, and the gentle forgiveness in Mrs. Patterson's eyes, he felt a strange mix of guilt and hope. Passengers around them began to murmur softly, some offering quiet encouragement. A few older commuters smiled at Mrs. Patterson, acknowledging her courage in the face of fear. Some younger passengers whispered words of support for the young man, hoping he would learn from this moment. The subway car, once tense and chaotic, had transformed into a place of reflection where fear, courage, and kindness intersected in the most unexpected way. John Cena crouched slightly to meet the young biker's level, his voice calm and encouraging. "You still have a choice," he said softly. "You can decide who you want to be. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's what you do after that matters. You can make today the moment you start doing better." The young biker swallowed hard, feeling the truth in Cena's words. It wasn't just about being caught or avoiding punishment. It was about understanding right from wrong and making a real change. Mrs. Patterson stepped closer, still holding her handbag and groceries. Her voice was gentle, but it carried sincerity and authority. "I forgive you," she said. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me. But please learn from this. Don't let it happen again." Her words struck the young man deeply. He had expected anger, yelling, or ridicule, but not this quiet, compassionate forgiveness. Her words made him realize that people could still care, even after he had made a mistake. The young biker nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. I understand, he said softly. I'll try to do better. The sincerity in his voice was genuine, and for the first time in a long time he felt like he could actually change. Cena stood back up, giving him a reassuring nod. Good, he said simply. That's all anyone can ask. The train continued to slow as it neared the platform, the doors opening fully to reveal the bustling station. Passengers began to move toward the exit, but the energy in the car remained shifted. Fear had been replaced by relief, tension by reflection, and despair by hope. Mrs. Patterson felt safe and valued again, and the young biker had begun to confront the consequences of his actions. As the three of them prepared to step off the train, Cena stayed close enough to ensure no sudden trouble arose. The subway platform was crowded, but the atmosphere was calm. People moved past, whispering about what they had seen. Some took photos, some simply watched in quiet admiration. Everyone seemed to understand that they had witnessed something rare, a real-life moment of courage, patience, and humanity in an everyday place. Mrs. Patterson stepped off first. Adjusting her grip on her bag and groceries, she took a moment to steady herself, looking back at the young man. I hope you really mean what you said, she said softly, a small smile on her face. The young man nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He hadn't fully realized how serious his actions were until now, and he promised himself silently that he wouldn't repeat the mistake. Cena followed behind them, ensuring everything remained calm. He guided Mrs. Patterson and the young man toward the center of the platform, making sure the crowd didn't overwhelm them. His presence was quiet but firm, a protective force that allowed both of them to navigate the busy station safely. The young biker stayed close, his mind replaying every moment. The grab, the confrontation, the forgiveness. It was a lot to process, but he knew it was necessary. Mrs. Patterson finally turned to Cena. You didn't have to do all this, she said. I could have managed. Cena shook his head with a small smile. Sometimes the right thing is just being there at the right time, he said. She nodded, understanding the truth in his words. It wasn't about heroics. It was about noticing when someone needed help and acting calmly and wisely. The young biker took a deep breath, feeling a strange mix of relief and humility. He had been reckless, selfish, and careless, but now he had a chance to reflect, to learn, and to grow. The moment in the subway car had been more than just a confrontation. It had been a turning point. He realized that mistakes could be corrected, that people could care, and that every choice mattered. Passengers around them had begun to disperse, some heading to their trains, others exiting the station entirely. The subway platform slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the impression of what had happened lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. They had seen fear transformed into courage, recklessness met with patience, and wrongdoing met with forgiveness. It was a quiet human lesson that left a lasting impact. Mrs. Patterson adjusted her groceries and handbag, smiling faintly at the young biker. I hope you really mean it, she said again. He nodded, his voice soft but earnest. I do, I won't forget this, he said. His words carried sincerity, and for the first time that day he felt a spark of hope for the future. Cena stepped back, giving them both space but remaining close enough to ensure everything stayed calm. Remember, he said, his voice quiet but clear, you don't need to be perfect. Just choose the right path moving forward. That's all anyone can ask. The young biker nodded once more, understanding that redemption wasn't about instant change. It was about the small, steady steps he would take from this point on. As the three of them prepared to go their separate ways, the platform seemed quieter, almost reflective. People around them had returned to their routines, but the memory of what had happened lingered. A moment of fear had been transformed into courage. A moment of wrongdoing had been met with forgiveness, and a moment of uncertainty had become a lesson in human kindness. Mrs. Patterson stepped toward the station exit, adjusting her bag and groceries one last time. She turned to the young biker, giving him a small nod of encouragement. Do the right thing, she said simply. He nodded again, feeling the importance of her words sink in. Cena followed closely behind, ensuring that both of them reached safety before the crowd became too thick. The subway station, usually filled with noise, chaos, and indifference, had become a stage for a small but meaningful story of human connection. Fear, Courage, guilt, forgiveness, and hope had all been woven together in a few short moments. For Mrs. Patterson, it was a relief and a reassurance that good people still existed. For the young biker, it was a chance to reflect and begin anew. And for Cena, it was another reminder that stepping in calmly, patiently, and wisely could make a difference in someone's life. As the subway pulled away from the station, Mrs. Patterson and the young biker went their separate ways, each carrying the lessons of the day with them. Cena remained behind, watching until both were safely out of the immediate crowd. The world of the subway resumed its usual rhythm, but the impact of that brief encounter lingered, a quiet but powerful reminder that courage, kindness, and forgiveness could change the course of an ordinary day. The subway station was quieter now, the rush of the afternoon crowd slowing as trains continued their journeys. Mrs. Patterson had stepped off safely, carrying her handbag and groceries. Her steps were still careful, but her heart felt lighter. The fear she had carried for the past few hours was fading, replaced by relief and gratitude. She glanced back toward the subway platform once more, as if wanting to make sure that the young biker and the man who had helped her were still there, witnessing the impact of their actions. The young biker sat on a nearby bench, head lowered, still processing everything that had just happened. His hands, previously trembling, were now resting on his knees, still gripping his helmet loosely. He couldn't stop thinking about the calm, steady presence that had changed the course of his afternoon. For the first time, he felt that someone had truly seen him, not just as a thief or a troublemaker, but as a person capable of making better choices. John Cena remained a few steps behind, keeping a careful eye on both of them. He wasn't there to boast or draw attention. He was there to make sure the young man understood the weight of his actions and that Mrs. Patterson remained safe. There was something unspoken in his presence, a quiet lesson that courage and kindness were stronger than fear or recklessness. The young man's mind replayed every moment, the grab, the hesitation, the forgiveness. It was overwhelming, but he knew it was a moment he would never forget. As Mrs. Patterson walked toward the exit, she paused to take a deep breath. She felt the warmth of gratitude toward the man who had helped her, and a strange sense of relief that the young biker had not caused her real harm. Her heart was still racing, but she knew she would tell her family about this day for years to come. It wasn't just about being robbed or protected. It was about witnessing human courage and compassion in action in the most unexpected place. The young biker finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I'm sorry," he said, looking at both Cena and Mrs. Patterson. "I never thought about the consequences, or how it would feel for someone else." His words were sincere, and for the first time he felt genuine remorse. Cena nodded, acknowledging the honesty. "Apologies are a start," he said, "but actions moving forward are what truly matter. You can choose to make this a turning point." The young biker nodded again, feeling the weight of the lesson pressing down gently but firmly. It was one thing to be confronted with authority, but it was another to be met with understanding and patience. The realization hit him fully. Mistakes were part of life, but they didn't define him. The choices he made after the mistakes would. Mrs. Patterson, still holding her bag, looked at him with kindness in her eyes. "I hope you remember this," she said softly. "Not because someone stopped you, but because you can choose to be better." Her words sank deeply into him. He had grown up thinking that life was a series of obstacles to outsmart, rules to bend, and consequences to avoid. But in this brief encounter, he had learned something far more powerful: compassion, accountability, and the chance to redeem oneself. Passengers who had witnessed the events began to exit the subway car and move along the platform. Some whispered softly to one another about what they had just seen, sharing their amazement. A quiet sense of awe lingered in the air. They had witnessed not just a theft prevented, but a lesson in courage, patience, and forgiveness. The story of the afternoon was no longer just about a bag. It was about humanity in its simplest, most powerful form. The young biker took a deep breath, finally lowering his helmet onto the bench beside him. He looked at Cena and said, I'll do better. I'll make the right choices from now on." Cena gave a small smile, not boastful or showy, but warm and encouraging. "That's all anyone can ask of you," he replied. "Every day is a chance to start over and do what's right." Mrs. Patterson adjusted her groceries and handbag, feeling the energy of the subway station around her. She realized that while the situation had been frightening, It had also reminded her of the good that exists in people. Acts of courage and kindness are not always loud or dramatic. They can be simple, quiet, and still change lives profoundly.